read or no? Okay, all right. So, you all set, Joe?
You're on.
All right. Good morning. It's Monday, December 7th. This is the Tufton Borough Board of Selectmen's regular Monday meeting. Our chairman, Lloyd Wood, cheated the Grim Reaper a week ago today. And as a condition of his release, he's on light duty and has asked me to run the meeting this morning, so which I'm happy to do. Let's begin with the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first order of business is a public hearing on a comprehensive public rights-of-way regulation ordinance. We will now conduct a hearing on a comprehensive set of regulations proposed by the board entitled Town of Tufton Borough Regulations for Excavations in and Management of Town Streets and Public Rights-of-Way. The purpose of the proposed regulation is to exercise the town's authority to manage its public rights-of-way in a non-discriminatory, competitively neutral manner. The proposed regulations will regulate construction, excavation, or work within town roads and public rights-of-way, require that persons or entities comply with a comprehensive application process before engaging in any such construction, excavation, or work within town roads and public rights-of-way, and impose various surety and permit requirements to protect the integrity of town roads and public rights-of-way in the future. I will not read the regulation out loud because they are lengthy, but copies have been made available at the town clerk's office, and we also have a copy available here. We will now open the floor to public comment on the proposed regulations. Any person who wishes to speak in favor of the proposed regulations, to speak against the proposed regulations, or who wishes to speak otherwise on the proposed regulations is now invited to make public comment before the board. Is there any person who wishes to speak against the proposed regulations? Kathy, can you see if anybody's
Nobody's on
called on?
now.
Okay.
No one has joined us.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Any of our current license or agreement holders? Any of our citizens?
Nothing from the floor.
If no one wishes to speak, then the public comment portion of the hearing is now officially closed. Is there a motion to adopt the Town of Tufton Borough regulations for excavation in and management of town streets and public rights-of-way?
I'll move the article.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries 3-0. And I believe we've got the final copy of this. I think we need to sign before it's posted. I'm not sure.
You have a copy here?
Yeah, I know I do. I know. All right. Any public input?
None.
Let's move on to review and approval of minutes. The first set of minutes is regular meeting minutes from November 23rd. Are there any additions or corrections?
Yes.
Lloyd?
Please go to page 2. Please go a few lines down where it's emphasized dark print where it says Frost, and the next line says Binax now. Everyone found what I'm talking about?
I don't have it.
No, I only have page 1, 3,
Go to the reverse side.
and 5.
What happened to two?
Go to the
Mine's
reverse side.
missing two, no.
No,
Mine's missing two, the second
I
one.
don't have two
It
either.
must have been
No,
a copy.
Maybe I'll close it.
all right.
So,
This is page 2.
Yep,
That's showing symptoms, not systems.
okay.
Can I show that to the?
Well,
Yeah,
what I would suggest is
just
that
circle it and I'll.
that
Yes.
we'll give the marked up copy
Yep.
to
So
Kathy.
it needs to be symptom,
Yes,
system?
right,
Right.
so,
And forward that in my copy.
yep,
Other than that, good job.
Page 3,
yep,
let's see, in the text, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, the 11th line down.
Mhm.
And do work to the existing benches, signage, and lighting needed at the beach. Some tree trimming needs to be done.
Okay.
That's all I have.
okay. I will entertain a motion for approval as corrected.
I'll move we approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on to the non-public minutes from November 23rd.
I have nothing.
I'll move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and these minutes are sealed. Yep. Okay, so we have an appointment at 9:30 and we're
The last
Running.
in there one.
I
running.
tried to leave room for the meeting, for the public hearing.
Yeah, well, no, that's perfect. Let's move on to the signature file. First item is an intent to cut for PID 33-9 and 43-3-4.
I'll move we sign it.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next item is a request for change in employee compensation for Jane Lemire.
This is a new one, because they've never signed one for a person. So-
Right, so this is to approve her,
It's not changing.
her wages. Right.
It's just,
Okay, I'll move we sign it.
All right, do I have a second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next is a compensation form for Lisa Herder, the administrative assistant for the police department.
I'll move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Then we have a whole slew of compensation adjustment forms for the fire department. This is for all of the hall members.
and that was, according to Diane, that's from the 2020, they just never signed the sheet, so it took them a while to hunt down the people, I guess.
I see, okay. All right, so this is this year's.
This is this
All right.
page.
All right, I'm gonna suggest that we not sign them as we're sitting here today, but,
So you're looking for, I'll move approval.
yeah.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And I think we'll put them with checks and sign them on Friday, unless you want to sit here and sign them while we're reading. All right, then the next item in the signature file is contract for grant writing services with Joya Hughes. Has everybody had a chance to review it?
Yes.
I have not.
All right, take a look at it and we can move on to other items. Okay. If you want some time to review it, that's fine. If you want to look it over and deal with it.
No, I'm
now.
good, I'm good.
All right,
I'll move approval.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
And I think it's only one.
If one signature, and we'll have the chairman sign it. How about we move on to some budgets?
Sounds good.
All right. First one we have here is revaluation of property, 4152. And
Do you need an explanation?
Yeah.
Okay.
so this was a budget that we approved at 46,224, and I guess we found out it was submitted in there. It was submitted in error at that rate. It should have been
Right,
46.
if you add the two, under the narrative column where it says assessing and
Right.
utility assessing, if you add them together, they come to the 46,980, not the 46,224. She
Right.
just had plugged in the wrong
All
one.
right.
All right.
So this has gone all the way through. So we need to correct our approval or reapprove it at $46,980, which is,
$756.
yeah,
I'll make a motion to reapprove the reevaluation.
I'll second.
Budget 4152.
all right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. So 4152 is approved with the corrected value of $46,980. Next budget is 4153 legal expenses. So
Do we have a,
the approved budget for this year is $57,600, and the requested amount is $67,850 for 2021, which,
so it appears, and I haven't audited the bills, but planning board budget's up $10,000, but they've already overspent their 2020 budget by $4,296, and there'll probably be more than that.
yeah, and the 20 was their submission for this year, anticipating some of the legal action that's in the system right now,
Right.
challenges to planning board decisions that are wending their way through the court system. So I don't know that it'll be $20,000. So I guess what I wonder is if we look at our legal line, this year we budgeted 44, and so far we spent a little under 30.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's gonna be higher next year though, because a couple of the cases are gonna end up in court, or actually making it to court.
Right, right.
Um,
There's something else to take into effect in the last 2 years. As the state winds down, for example, Sue mentioned it with cemetery, the training sessions that they normally have, they haven't had them for 2 years. So what it means is when a different committee bumps into an issue, there's not a class they can take on it. They have to contact an attorney. And then that's happening with the other committees other than just the cemetery. A perfect example is conservation. You know, how complicated it is getting an easement and double checking everything, checking the boundaries and all that. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess back to Brother Marcuson's position, I wouldn't be opposed to looking at $40,000
On our line?
on our line, and I'm wondering, conservation's gone from 1800, 660, 0 to 2,000 where they've spent nothing. And it, I mean, how defense, should we wait until Steve gets here? Because that seems like
Yeah.
a big jump.
Well, and the other thing that I wonder is, I know they've had some engagement with the attorney, but I don't see any billed activity for this year. So it may be that it's just getting billed into the regular legal line rather than conservation. But I'm happy to wait and deal with that when Steve gets here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be great to get this approved today, but I think maybe, so if we were to drop ours to 40, that would be $4,000.
Yep.
And even if, well, 4,500. So that's 350. 63, 350. And we're still looking at $6,000 worth
Yep.
of increase. A little better than $6,000.
Well, like a lot of these budget lines, what we're doing is sort of shooting in the dark because you don't know what's going to be coming. And if there's expense there, we're going to have the expense, we're going to have to cover it one way or the other. But having said that, I'm comfortable dropping our line by $4,000. And we've had 2 out of the last 5 years that it was
Mhm.
over 40, but it seems to have quieted down a little bit, so.
44, 35, 39, 22, yeah, only, yeah, twice.
Yep.
And, one was 41,813, so I think $1,800 is pretty easy to figure out.
Right.
And
And this is only as of October.
did we get a, I'm sorry?
The expense is only, it looks like she only did it to like October, right?
Well,
It hasn't
so-
gotten a official November in there?
I have it December 4th.
Yep.
I would caution the board that
And the cemetery, do we have some kind of statement from her,
No,
from the chairman about going up $150?
she hasn't submitted this budget.
I caution my fellow board members, when we're involved in tax sale property,
Mhm.
remember the last one, 3 years ago, there were a lot of costs. I anticipate we're gonna have the same thing with multiple properties
But
we
those,
have now.
but those costs associated with the tax sale They come out of the proceeds of the tax sale.
Right.
That doesn't come out of legal.
But we still have to budget for it.
Well, we have to budget for it, but it's gonna come back in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know that, and I appreciate what you're saying, I just don't know that we're gonna spend $40,000.
Well,
I know we're gonna have a couple of
in
cases.
17, we spent 44
Yeah,
on a smaller parcel.
so it's your suggestion we leave it alone?
I'd like to give it I can wait and make up my mind when I listen to what Steve has to say.
All right. So let's
Or let's hold it up.
hold that one aside until Mr. Wingate is here. Move on to personnel administration.
Yeah, I'm a,
And
that was, what was that?
didn't we already deal with that?
We did.
Yeah.
We did, but she did not include Medicare adjustments in the budget on the last vote.
So that's the social security one,
I'm assuming, yeah.
and it's 20,000.
Yeah, she said it was a little over 19,000, so it was the.
All right. So what did we approve before? Was it the 613?
You did.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
all right.
When she submitted it, she had that.
Yeah. All right.
I just, okay, let's think about this.
So I'll entertain a motion for the adjustment to include Medicare, which takes the total budget from approval level 613,251 to 633,004.
Well, having spent 45 minutes with our budget committee debating this particular budget, it's going to be difficult for me to contain myself at the next meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, looking at our rate of travel, currently it looks as though we're going to be pretty close to spent once all the bills are in. We're running a $50,000 a month expense.
Mm-hmm.
And if you add 50 to the 584, you're up to 630.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I mean, I had thought, not to ramble, but I had thought last week that I'd just ask you two fellows if I could just,
If
Leave
you
it
want to
alone.
leave it alone, fine.
But
You
I
know,
don't
and we
know
overspend
whether
the line,
we're gonna overspend by 20 grand.
and it's not the end of the world, right?
Right.
I guess it's more concerning to me, and probably to you, that we get through the process and it isn't until later that something that's,
I mean, if worst case scenario is all they can do is leave it alone. I mean, although asking them to revisit, maybe they've reloaded their weapons and want to do it all over again. But having looked at what we've spent so far and looking at what we've got for next year, I'll make a motion that we approve the 633.
okay.
004.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. The only other budget we have here is,
Other highways and streets.
the other highways and streets, 4313. So, and I don't have any, we don't have any submission on it, so.
Because she said that the selectmen make that decision.
So what?
She said the selectmen makes the decision, that you guys are the department head.
Well, but typically, we have a conversation about what we're gonna include, and I know that there's some expense associated with permitting that I think is beyond what we've already put money aside for. I don't think we're ready to deal with this one today.
No, we're not. And I haven't been playing phone tag with Tyler Forbes on
Yep.
Lake Street.
So,
So that would probably give us a firmer number as far as.
I've had a very blunt conversation with Jim Beam, and about this, I said, who plows the docks?
What? I'm sorry.
Who plows the docks?
Okay.
Takes the snow. When there's a board that needs to be replaced, who does it? And I asked him, oh, we send Kathy Poundit to go down and pound nails? Wrong. I said, and what about for 2 years we've wanted the correct signs put up that talks about parking and docking. He has the signs and it's been 2 summers and he's forgotten to do it because he's not responsible for docks. Baloney.
well,
And that's a
my-
direct quote.
My memory is that Jack is engaged in the docks and bridges process as much as,
Yes, he does the thermalators.
and repair work, and so
Yes.
it's,
How does the conversation you had with the road agent affect what we're looking at? What would you suggest we do there?
We need his input.
I'm sorry?
We need his input.
Oh, okay, no, I'm fine with that.
yeah.
I didn't know where you were going, whether or not we needed to spend more money or what the.
I mean, this is a guy who has a couple of barges that builds docks all over the lake.
Yeah,
Yeah, all right,
all right, well, I'll
So-
chat with Tyler and maybe we can get the road agent.
Yeah.
come by.
I'll deal with this one maybe next week.
I thought we had animal
Hmm?
control, did we already do animal control?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Gentlemen,
Come on down.
we're up to you.
Hi, guys.
Good morning.
Happy winter.
I know, not really,
Welcome
not as bad as you said.
Welcome back. So before we get to your subject, we're dealing with legal budgets, and we had a question about the legal line for conservation. So this year, we budgeted 2,000. Through this week shows we have spent nothing, and the budget request for this coming year is 2,000 again. Now, I know you've had some legal expense. Has it not been billed yet, or did it?
I would assume it hasn't been billed yet. Yeah,
Okay.
We had a conference call with Rick,
Yeah,
and my guess is that could happen again in the new year.
yeah. All right, so last year, Conservation spent $476 in legal expense, and we budgeted 2,000 for this year. So this year, we've spent some, but we don't know how much yet. The question is $2,000 the right number to put in there, or is it?
It's just so hard to say if, like, for example, we have a new, that we're gonna talk about in a minute, this Mount Pleasant easement. It's a new document that, it looks great to me. I don't know whether you want to have that reviewed by Rick, because we haven't signed one of these before. It seems like a slam dunk to me, but I'm not a lawyer.
I guess my feeling is a matter of course, having it reviewed by council before we sign it is always a good idea, even if it's the same as one that was done last year, just because sometimes court cases change the way things are interpreted, and we're not up to speed on that. That's
And they're not lawyers either, although we play one on TV.
Right.
or stayed at the Holiday Inn Express last night, right? Yeah.
And we
But
really
that-
hope we're gonna even have an acquisition or an easement next year. I would assume that we would be going through the same process, so at least closing. So there should be something in there. The last one, Rick did not bill us for extra work. It was created, rewriting the debt easement,
Mhm.
which was the complicated one that hopefully we're not using anymore when we work with Lake Region Conservation Trust. But he ate all of that. I mean, we were extremely lucky, and all he took out of it was what was budgeted in the grant, which was a kind of standard clothing, or contract review and then clothing, so.
And do you remember how much that was?
How much he billed for?
Well, how much the grant amount was, or whatever?
I think it was in the vicinity of $500.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and check.
So we can assume that to review this document, it's gonna be somewhere around $500 or $700.
I think so.
And then we've got something else going on this year as well. Yeah.
I think if our dreams came true, we would have one acquisition, which would result in granting an easement to somebody else. And we would have two easements that a private landowner would grant us. If, that's, all the marbles fell in place, that would
So in
happen.
the creation of those easements, does your committee create the easement, or do you have legal counsel create the
It would
easement?
be one where we create the easement, and then there would be two where we'd be working with the landowner. If everything worked out.
So even if, let's assume for a moment that everything worked out, and you got 3 transactions that are going forward, and you're creating the language for the easements on all of them. With
Yeah.
the exception of this.
Well, I think on the acquisitions, it would probably be something like this. Depends on who owns it.
I guess what I'm getting at though is, let's assume for a moment that we agree with your policy of creating easements in-house. They still need to get reviewed. So let's put a number on them. Let's say it's $700 a piece. And now you're at $2,100 for 3. So I guess I'm defending the $2,000.
I think the $2,000 is a good high number. Depends on where you want to aim for.
Perfection.
And you've got other departments, are they all gonna be high? I think going for something in between is reasonable, as long as you're flexible enough to say, oh, we didn't spend it all over here, so we can shift them over there.
I guess
If that's not possible, I'd stick with the 2,000.
my philosophy is we look at each line individually and defend it. And if we can defend the $2,000, then I'm good with it.
Okay.
I'm not gonna balance your needs against ZBA just for the sake of a mathematical duel. So, if the legal budget goes up, and it has significantly gone up, I just have to be able to defend it with the budget committee, and then we have to defend it at town meeting. And it's defensible as far as I can see.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Do we want to finish that? before-
Yeah, let's finish this and
Okay.
then I won't forget to come back to it. All right. So where do we end up?
Okay, so I'm gonna move legal expenses 4153 at $63,850. That's
Reducing our line.
our line by $4,000.
Okay.
For purposes of discussion, I'll second.
All right. Any discussion?
Did you want to change anything else, Lloyd?
I would be repeating the issues I have with tax sale property.
Right, but I feel confident that $40,000 worth of legal expenses are going to cover that. If it doesn't, as Bill mentioned, it's coming in as part of the sales proceeds, so we may be upside down on that line, but I don't think we'll be upside down on the budget.
Yep.
I understand where you're coming from.
So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Sorry.
4153 passes at $63,850. All right, now on to what you're here for, sir. The floor is yours.
Lakeshore Conservation Trust, who asked us to hold the easement on Mount Pleasant, wants to go through a closing in January. That's when you would actually sign an easement, but I sent this to you, and I'm recommending it, so we just need to know if you're okay with moving forward, and you're going to be willing to sign it when the closing occurs.
Well, speaking for me, provided that it gets reviewed by town council before we sign it, then I see no reason to.
I have received some further information about why they're proposing this streamlined version that we weren't given before, and it was helpful, and it makes sense when you read it compared to the other one. This is between a certified land trust, and they have to go through a very rigorous process to be certified, and a government agency. There's a very, very, very low chance that there will ever be litigation or disagreement between those kind of parties. It's when private parties are involved, particularly when the land ownership changes, and a new landowner with not necessarily the same objectives as the original landowner who made the deal comes in and says, and gets his lawyer and says, so I don't like this, how can we break it?
Yeah, so you need
That's when the legal
a more
stuff
airtight contract in those situations, covering.
And win or lose, it adds a page or two to every year to the document, or a change of language somewhere. So that's still the easement base that we would use for the private landowner.
So the 87-page easement you use for a private landowner, or however long it is, can be streamlined when we're dealing with somebody like LRCT.
Right. So this is clean and clean. It's easy to understand. It's basically 8 pages long versus 40 to 50 pages long.
Well, it shortens or reduces your register of deeds fees as well.
Right.
And you're gonna hold the easement? The conservation, or we are the town?
The town owns the easement. We can't own anything.
Right.
So the town owns the easement.
And who manages the easement?
Lake Region Conservation Trust does all the management.
Okay.
We have what's called the right of enforcement. We have the right to go on the property and see what you're doing anytime we want. And if we don't think that they're living within the agreement, we can call them out on it. That's basically our role. I'd say the meat of the document is what happens if Lake Region Conservation Trust no longer is viable. So their interest can be transferred to another land trust, and then that trust becomes the holder of this, or it can they can be reconstituted in some way, but that's kind of what most of this talks about. And the other part is that LCHIP, because they provided quite a bit of financing, they have an equal right of enforcement as we do. So there's two enforcers involved.
So this is actually kind of a hybrid model. Normally what happens when LCHIP gives the land, they get the power enforcement up front, similar to this. And this protects the property between when the landowner sells it and the easement goes in place. So there's that period of time between the two documents. This power of enforcement is always in the deed for LCHIP. So what they're saying is by putting the town in that process, we also get that power enforcement right up front, and then we don't need the easement because it's part of the original deed. So it's a more streamlined, but it also protects the property better.
And the way this works physically is, Lake Region has to make annual report. And if for some reason, LCHIP, who have paid employees that do this kind of thing, if they are suspicious in any way, we wind up being the local enforcer, so to speak. As we would go out and do that inspection, and we would make a report, and then consult with them on how, how to move forward. Probably 99.9% chance that would ever happen.
Any thoughts, Lloyd?
Yes, a couple of questions. How much land are we talking about?
I think it's like 140 acres. approximately.
Is it spread over 2 communities?
No, it's all in Tuftonboro.
Well,
There is some,
it's some in Wolfboro.
Pardon?
There's a sliver of land in Wolfboro.
So there's already a precedent. For example, the Hersey property, you people hammered out all the moving parts, and there was a sliver in that parcel that was in Wolfboro, right? So is it?
that's more than a sliver there.
Well, the point is, it's not your first rodeo working with
Yeah.
2 communities. The next thing is, what part of town is this in?
This, in North Line Road, just north of North Line Road, right on the Wolfboro border.
Okay, is it accessible from Brown Road?
No, not legally,
Okay,
It doesn't abut Brown Road,
it does not.
but it does abut the Class 6 section of North Line Road.
Yeah, and it becomes class 6 before you actually get to this property. And
I'm sorry, you said what?
It becomes class 6,
Before you get to the
yeah, a
property.
couple of 100 yards before you get to that property. And at some point, Lakes Region will be coming back to Tuftonboro and saying, how can we create foot access to this? I think they'll probably want to do some kind of parking at where it becomes class 6 and go a foot trail from there.
now I know the current owners have planted many trees and help mitigate erosion and whatnot. Are there any things that your contacts recommend where the town needs to do something? Or do you understand my question?
Yeah, Lakes Region will take care of things that are on the property itself. I think the class 6 road is in very poor condition. And I don't think we should bring it up to any use standard, although there are landowners on the south side of the road that have been using it and will want to use it in the future. I would.
Well, there is a precedent there, and it was just done on another section of town. Landowners, abutting landowners, with permission of the town, under the auspices of the road agent, can make authorized improvements, so they get their tractors in or get a truck in to cut Christmas trees or something like that. As a matter of fact, they've done a nice job on one road that I went and viewed this week. But you answered my question. I have another question, kind of, sort of. How many total acres does the Conservation Commission or the town have that are protected, or any easements, or we're thinking of buying? Or, is it about 5% of the total acreage in town?
Not us. Our percentage is, I think would be less than 0.5%. Is Lakes Region Conservation Trust has the bulk of it, which is up at the Castle and the Cloud area, and the Ossipee Range. That's where all the big conserved acres are in town, and nearly all of that is unbuildable. So,
Well, I know the backland, for example, is well served by current use. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
under your
Well,
auspices, but
the current use
No.
actually provides no protection conservation-wise. I mean, it's a nice incentive for landowners not to be forced through taxation to sell, but otherwise, it really doesn't do anything for conservation, for long-term conservation.
right. But it is an option to maintain the rural character of
Oh,
the
yeah.
town. Yes.
I mean, it's not such a big deal here down southern New Hampshire. That's where it was really a problem, where any kind of open land was being taxed like it was a pending development. And those landowners, a lot of them were, break-even farmers. They just couldn't handle those kind of taxes, and they were forced to sell.
Yep.
And often, and then they had speculative rates, so they didn't make a lot of money, and then all the land got developed, and everybody who lives there now thinks, wouldn't it have been nice if we didn't have all of that? So that's kind of what our idea in Tuftonboro is for conservation, is to pick up some particularly special places, and try to save them so that every acre in town doesn't get developed.
Yes, I agree with you.
Thank you.
Thank you and your committee.
Current use, I'm of two minds. I mean, I look at this piece of property and I guess my first comment is, as one of the landowners of this piece you're talking about, I certainly hope there's more and more language that will keep it from becoming a for sale piece of property sometime in the future. I'd like to just keep it the way it is. But the taxes on that 130 acres is $900, something like that. And I think, as Steve said, current use in the southern part of the state and current use here are two different animals.
Yes.
And I think it's almost an abused system here, because you're asking everybody else to pay your taxes or pay for the services that you get. I'm not a real fan of current use. And I think I think the landowners was kind of sold the bill of goods as well. And as the process proceeds, now it's not, you can take it out of current use and pay the 10% of the value process. Now it is, according to court determinations, that if you've got 100 acres and it's developable, you can only pay the penalty on each lot as it's sold. So you're actually paying 10% penalty on each lot, which is an excessively higher amount of money than taking the whole piece out and paying the penalty on that. So it's changed over time, and I don't think a lot of the landowners that have their land in current use are fully aware of that change. Appreciate your efforts, take good care of it.
So I'll entertain a motion to, or maybe we're not at that point with this. As I say, my opinion is, with respect to the easement, we want to make sure that it's reviewed by council. I know from some of the stuff that goes on in the past, just looking at what comes back from council, sometimes, I mean, it's like a word here, a word there, doesn't mean anything to me, but they, our council is always looking out for the interests of the town, and so recommendations that they come forward with are focused on protecting and preserving the town's position.
So will the selectmen?
We have to sign the easement.
Right, so we'll be required to sign the easement, so I don't think, or you will, because I gotta abstain.
Yep.
But, so I don't know that we need to vote on it. I think
Yeah, that's probably right.
Is it fair for the record to reflect that the majority of the board are asking or recommending that they go ahead and research it legally?
What if you say that you support this easement pending approval by the legal counsel?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, we're not gonna, we will, we'll consider it and sign it when it's presented, but,
That's an accurate statement
Yeah.
to make.
so, but we do support it, so,
Our issue is to tell Lakeview Conservation Trust to go ahead or not.
So maybe you do need to have the selectmen vote
yeah.
on their recommendation.
Do you want to make that motion?
Yes, I'll move that, that we support, that the record reflect that we support this easement pending review by town council.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And
I'll
you're
abstain.
abstaining because of,
Conflict of
yeah,
interest.
conflict of interest. All right.
Thank you.
Is that good? Is that good enough to, great?
Let the minutes reflect.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, so the next item is the 19-mile Brook monitoring plan. Right? Yeah.
Yep, it's moving along nicely. I think where we are right now is we're trying to eliminate duplication between what Wolford is required to do and what's on the plan that we are going to approve or disapprove. Currently, everything is on the plan, but it's not meshed with their timing and their permit requirements, so we're working on that right now. And I think all the pieces are gonna fall into place pretty soon.
So we had a landowner or a son of a landowner last meeting, I think it was.
Right.
And their concern, although the land he was talking about is in Wolfboro, their concern was the impact of the proposal that Wolfboro was putting forward on 19 Mile Brook in Wolfboro. And I guess they're gonna try to go underneath it or do, I'm not clear on exactly what the plan is there.
What that issue is that the design that DES has approved requires that they actually dig underneath the brook to the other side, and they create just filter beds for the effluent to come up through. That's the design, which would take out this breakout water that doesn't filter as designed originally all the way through. And it collects it and then puts it back in the ground, and then it comes up underneath the stream. In order to do that design, they have to go a couple of feet over the midline of the...
Is that a separate permit from the permit they have for the major injection well thing?
Is it, what?
Is it a separate permit?
Would it stop it? Or,
No, the permit from DES, is that different from the original permit?
Right.
With the
And
underneath.
it sounded to me as though they were gonna have to pick up some more property from these
Yeah.
brooks.
In
So
order-
that would,
in order to do that design, yes, they have to pick up.
so does that mean that they have to make an amendment to their permit, or do they have to file a different permit for that?
No, that's the permit that they have now.
It's the original permit, Chip.
So they got a permit to do something on property they don't own? I don't believe that in a minute. So they have to at least amend the current permit. Or they need to get a
If they
different.
couldn't get the property, then they would have to amend the permit with a new design.
If they couldn't get it?
Yeah.
Okay. Be that as it may, I mean, that's their problem. But I just want to make sure that Luxembourg's noticed as a party to not only their original permit, but also whatever new permits they might get that affect 19 lots. So whether it's in Wolfboro across the line or if it's in Tuftonboro, we need to be a party to these things. So that if something goes wrong, we have standard.
I've had a lot of communications with Scott,
Yeah.
and both in terms of advice and, because he's always asking me advice, how can I do this,
Right.
how can I stop that? And also explaining what we're trying to accomplish, which is basically to monitor the quality of the water in 19 Mile Brook,
Right.
so that we know what the effects are. So we're not a party to Wolfboro's plan. We're not an agent of DEF. We're
It
just
doesn't,
trying to look
okay, it
after
doesn't
the
matter,
Wolfboro.
Steve, and maybe ask Rick if you have to. But let's presume for a second that something goes wrong. And Wolfboro has a problem that affects us. If we're not a party to the permitting process, then we don't have standing possibly in court. Because I could go up there as a private citizen and monitor the brook. That doesn't give me standing on some problem that might arise. So we're just an extra set of citizens in the view of the court. So I just want to make sure we tighten this up a little bit on Wolfboro, because I'm not confident that their system's going to work. I hope it does, but if it doesn't, I don't want to be sitting here saying, well, there's nothing we can do about it, or there's no remedy. So whatever we can do to tighten this up now is going to help us in the future if something bad happens. It's no different than your easement.
Well, I think we do have standing, because
Well, I know you presume we have standing, but if you read some of the current court decisions that have come down, people who obviously look as though they have standing have been ruled to not have standing. So we have to be pretty clear. And as I said earlier, I don't play a lawyer on television, so I think maybe we need to check with Rick or whoever you're using for an attorney and just make sure it's tight enough so that we protect ourselves, protect the citizens.
To follow up on what my brother Selectmen is saying, I can think of two examples where Tufton Borough gets roped into spending tax dollars on lawyers. One is when the Stockman-Whitten property was sold and the state of New Hampshire required a new entrance be put in with visibility and it be paved. Within 2 or 3 years, Holmgren didn't like the way they did it, and who did he sue? The town of Tufton Borough, because it was their road. We weren't a party to the negotiations. Yeah, we were advised of it, but we weren't individual. Another example is Cow Island and Camp Belknap. There was friction there among the litigants, and now there's writs of mandamus, and we're in court.
you need Farm
Farmland, excuse me. And what happens is we legally have to spend tax dollars on defense lawyers, and it's something similar. If something is catastrophic up there, it affects people, property, and our neighbors. So, and I know that you've mentioned that more than once. So.
Yeah, I don't see us having any liability here, because our role was, we were invited to review the permit application and to make comment. And our comment was that we would like to see a more, a better monitoring plan, and then we listed all of those things. And now we don't, I think at least if you take email evidence, we have a written agreement that, Dave Ford sent us a letter basically agreeing to comply with that. So that's been our involvement. We have no responsibility for the quality of the water or what they're doing. We've taken some responsibility to try to look after the interest of residents of Tufton Borough and the quality of water in 19 Mile Brook. I think that's the only thing we've done. And if any of the evidence comes back bad, I think our course of action is to go to DEF and say, you have the authority of enforcement, and this is the information we've acquired through an independent process. But I think that's our role rather than having to hire a lawyer to sue Wolfboro or something.
Well, the couple of elements in that statement that you just made. First of all, financial responsibility for damage is going to rest on the shoulders of Tufton Borough. Second of all, Dave Ford has no power to commit Wolfboro to anything. He's not an elected official. We need to get a letter from the Selectmen if we want to get some sort of
He went to the select board last week, it should be in their minutes.
Mhm.
I don't know whether it's public or non-public, but he reported to me that they approved of this effort.
Well, they should provide that in writing with the signature of the Selectmen. I mean, it's pretty simple stuff. You did say your job is to protect the welfare and quality of water of 19 Mile Brook. Well, that said, if that quality is somehow diminished or catastrophically diminished, the landowner that relies on the quality of that water is going to look at the town of Tufton Borough for relief. They're not going to sue Wolfboro. They're going to sue us. You know, if Stockton decides that.
This is confused a little bit by the fact that the landowner has done management that has negative effects on the brook continuously for over 20 years.
That's a red herring. There's no way in the world that any landowner individually could do the kind of impact that Wolfboro's doing. There's no way in the world they could do that unless they were in an industry, and there aren't any industries in Tuftonville. So if the landowner was fertilizing his fields for 40 years, he couldn't impact that brook as much as Wolfboro's going to impact that brook. So it's a false comparison, and it's of no value to where we sit today, because the only thing impacting that brook currently, largely impacting the brook, is going to be Wolfboro. So that's the deal we have to look at. I mean, saying that somebody in the past did something is meaningless.
I don't see how that puts us in a position of liability.
Because if you read your empowerment document, why did we have a conservation commission formed? It was to do exactly what you do, which is protect the environment and the natural resources of Tufton Borough, and to create easements and all that sort of thing. But inherent in that is a belief by the citizenry that things like the impact on 19 Mile Brook by Wolfboro are also in your purview. So knowing that, any citizen is going to, or if they have an attorney for whatever reason, is going to go to you first and say, well, what did you do about it? Or to us, actually. We don't go to you because you're not the executive. But so that's the only reason we need to tighten the deal up, so that when that happens, or if that happens, we're not in a situation of saying, well, we thought they were doing the right thing, and they said they were going to do the right thing, and there you have it. Well, that's not good enough. Especially in Tuftonboro, where we get such a low tax rate and such big value. I mean, all of a sudden we're like a fat cow. Some Boston attorney will come in here and say, well, pay my client $10 million for the damage she did to the property by letting 19 Mile Brook be polluted. What are we going to do? We need to be in a position of saying we did everything we could up to the point where it happened. And then we can shift the blame. But if we don't do anything, we just rely on Dave Ford and his proclamation. I don't think we're doing it enough. That's all I'm saying.
All right, tell me what you want me to do.
All right.
Do you have an attorney other than Sager?
No,
Okay, so ask Sager what his position would be vis-a-vis the Dave Ford document and any sort of activity that happens in addition to what's currently going on. Because I don't know that we can do anything about what's going on now. But if they add to that permit, where should we be?
We're fortunate to have Rick Sager wearing a hat that supports us because he was appointed by the court to work with the 5 Hersey siblings that don't talk to each other. And it took a couple of years working with him and his committee, and it has turned out well. So the nice thing is we have 3 individuals that it's not their first rodeo and have a working relationship together. So
I mean, I'd rather Steve didn't have to stand in the middle of all this, but there he is.
yep.
I mean, if Sager says that we should do something that you don't feel comfortable doing, then that's fine. We'll do it.
Well, Steve's looking at another 20 hours of work here this week. I was gonna take this week off for a change. How about if we get through the process of determining what the recommended
The monitoring.
monitoring plan is,
Yeah.
Yes.
and then get Rick involved after that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I'm not a lawyer. The things you're speaking to seem to have some validity in my mind. The best way to get clarity on it is to have council review the situation.
Yeah, you know, you get his malpractice insurance, if nothing else. at least
Yeah.
it has.
There you go.
We still have to get all the history together for Rick. And there's plenty of it. You know.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
try to explain it to him so he understands it.
So, have you had a chance to look at this
Yeah.
plan? This, and I read through it. It seemed reasonable to me. Again, I'm not a
It's-
water scientist or,
And it's just for 2021, correct?
It's 3 years
Oh, it is 3
to
years.
begin in
Yeah.
2021.
Okay.
And if somehow it fell apart budget-wise, then I'd say plan for it, do it 2020, start 2022. There's no red flags hanging out there right now.
Does
I
any
think
money have to be
A
approved?
complete job than we did. You know, the Normandy study was a repeat of the original study. Science has moved on a bit since then, particularly in terms of how you can sample and,
Are there any costs for this program?
yeah.
And who's paying them and how much?
Wolfboro is paying them, but until we present the plan in total, we don't know. I think, I'd say it's in the $30,000 a year range,
Yep.
but that's a wild speculation on my part. We
I think-
still have to go through, you know, all of this sorting out. But I'm hoping that we wind up with one independent contractor doing all the sampling for both needs, our needs and the DES, the permit requirement. I think that's the best way to do it. I don't know whether it's politically feasible or not, but I think that would be the best way to do it. And that would also be the least expensive way to do it, and still get all the bells and whistles along with it.
My recollection of why the budget last year didn't happen was because we were all collectively disappointed with the results of the Normandy study. I mean, it just was, as you say, a revisit of the 10-year-old study. So
They have a breakdown of some of
which is
their-
what it was designed to be, is a
Right,
replication,
it didn't
right?
give us any road forward, and I think that was what.
We weren't disappointed in the whole study. The bulk of the study we thought was good. What we were disappointed in was the water sampling portion of it,
Mhm.
which in the original study was brief and intermittent. It wasn't continuous. Wolfhard already developed a lot more data that was independently taken, so it was a kind of a moot point compared to the data that was already available. So what we did with FD and say, okay, this is all of what we got. What we really want is a good monitoring program over a series of years that will assure us that throughout all the different periods of the year, different weather events, different flow rates, we know what the quality of the water is. And it's, you read in there, it's mostly chemical analysis, but it's also some what's called rock bag sampling, where they look at microorganisms that are hiding in the rock and things, which are like the canary in the coal mine. We don't understand all of that sentence, but we know that the canary either dies or lives. So and we know that works with all these little microorganisms. So that's in there too. I feel good about it. Larry Gill is our leading expert on this kind of stuff. He's reviewed it all. He came up with basically 3 questions, which FD is looking at right now and going to give us the answers to. That's where we are.
No, just to finish my thought, it wasn't that we thought Normandy were bad guys. It's just that it didn't give us that road forward which we were looking for. And I think this particular proposal does. And we can modify it, I'm sure, from time to time upon agreement. But I'm going to move that we approve the monitoring study for 19 Mile Brook.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
All right?
Thank you for your 20 hours a week on this.
Does Steve have anything to do with the scenic byway thing, tree cutting?
No, that's planning board.
Okay, it's
Yeah.
not conservation at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've been made aware that there was tree cutting along one of the scenic byways without prior approval.
As far as I know, our only responsibility is there if somebody's proposing to cut scenic trees.
Right.
They have to come and present that at a commission meeting. We still don't have any enforcement authority, or even, we don't have an approval authority,
Yeah.
yea or nay either. We
Right,
can make
so-
recommendations to you, but I think that's our only role.
So it's your feeling, not to drag Steve into this, but it's your feeling it's the planning board's the venue?
Right. So I know in the past that permission to cut trees on scenic byways has been requested from and approved by the planning board. And if the Conservation Commission is informed on it too, it makes total sense, but I know it's.
Holgram went through that process for Sandy Knoll Road
Mhm.
when his original proposal. So they came to our meeting and made a presentation,
Mhm.
and I believe that we made a written comment back to you.
Right, so you would do the recommendation, and then the planning board would have the enforcement. I got it.
But I believe the issue there was safety, and I think our response was, if safety is the issue, then that should take precedence over visual values.
Are you talking about the current cutting, or?
Oh, that was way back, that was.
Okay,
Yeah, right.
so I don't think there's safety involved.
No.
It had to do with the view.
Yeah. And I'm not specifically familiar with the situation other than that we've been made aware of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, any tree that, as I understand it, any tree that is a safety hazard doesn't need any approval to be removed. But, you know, if you have a scenic byway, you can't just come and just,
That's correct. That is correct.
clean all that stuff out, right? Anything else for us?
Just want to note that starting today, they're gonna start jacking up the barn on the Cheney property.
Yeah.
So if you guys are interested,
They're gonna do what now, sir?
so the barn on the Cheney property, you know, they're redoing the whole thing, and the whole underside of that is all rotted out.
The equipment's there.
the equipment's there, so what they're doing is they're gonna actually raise the barn, excavate under it, put a foundation in, and then lower the barn back down on top of it.
Wow.
So they're starting that today, so, I mean, and Elizabeth Woodwork, the owner, has invited you guys to come over if you want to just take a gander at it. It should be
And the
a
new,
pretty,
the new owners are all in compliance with your easement, and they're happy about everything.
More than compliant.
Good.
they're great stewards of the property, so.
There hasn't been any preservation work on this property since before the easement
For the cheese on it.
implemented. All these measures are really to preserve the property.
I had a citizen ask me, the federal guidelines, can they post the land?
I had this conversation with Elizabeth
Yep.
Woodworth,
Yep.
and she said the gentleman came up, and he was under the impression just because it was conservation easement on it, he had the right to hunt on the property, and that's not true, because it's stated right in the easement document itself that they can control that.
The person who asked me, I said, gee, that's what I remember, but
All of the easements written at that time give the landowner the right to control access. All of our easements are like that.
But even the Mount Pleasant easement, which is not gonna be landowner controlled at all, because it's gonna be the conservation trust, it really depends on the language of the easement. So if these guys and Lakes Region Conservation decide that for whatever reason, there shouldn't be hunting up there, then there won't be hunting up there. I mean, so it's there, even though it's publicly owned, so to speak, it's the conditions in the easement that rule.
yeah, they're the surrogate owner.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Today, when we talk to the landowner, that is an item of discussion. Because, certainly for us, public use of a publicly owned easement is an important thing. But there can be other good reasons the other way around.
Sure.
So it depends on what we're trying to conserve. If we're conserving for, public recreation, then that's important.
Yeah. And the other, I mean, believe it or not, there was a bald eagle at my driveway this weekend with about a 6-foot wingspan. I think they're still protected. And so there's any number of fauna that, or even flora that might need to have protection that would preclude hunting. So I know I'm trying to sell a piece of property that I'm a board member of a nonprofit in Albany, in Conway. And there's some mountain laurel or something like that that's really a rare plant that's on the upper slope of this property. So obviously you don't want hunters or anybody else tramping through it. It's a pretty small plot of it, but it's a rare species, so it depends on the piece.
So sometimes the recreation interest is so strong for, say, hiking, that hunting is not considered to be a conflict. So you have public access for hiking, but you don't, for safety reasons, you don't want hunting. That happens sometimes.
We could arm our hikers.
Why not? All right,
Hey, great.
thank you, gentlemen.
Be safe.
All right. Let's see if we have any other action items. Oh, we have IT bids to deal with.
What's that?
The information technology, computer services.
Oh, right.
So we have an RFP out, and we received 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 bids. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll go through them.
Can I pick up the wage increases and sign them?
Oh, sure. It's all right. The first, the one on top of the pile, and they're in no particular order, is from a company called V3 out of Columbia, South Carolina. And I'm having a hard time finding even where we, where the cost schedule is. You have both ready?
I was thinking if you open them all, if
Yep.
you want, I'll make a spreadsheet with the costs
Okay.
listed.
All right.
For next time, but you guys can do them.
Yeah, there's an awful lot here, so let me just go through them real quick,
With the names.
and then if you can sort of tabulate them for us. The next proposal is from Cybertron Technologies in Guilford, New Hampshire. Next is from Revon Networks in Hampstead. Armon, R-M-O-N, Networks in Hampstead. ANS Networking in Dover. Maestro Technologies. And where are they? Let's see where it's. Trenton, New Jersey. Lakes Region Computer in Center Harbor. And Stellar Networks in Newington. So does that mean we didn't get a proposal from the guy that's doing it right now?
Yeah, you did, Cybertron.
Cybertron.
Oh, okay. All right. So, rather
He's one
than,
member of it.
I'm sorry?
He's one member of there's a group of them.
Right, okay. So rather, I think it makes sense to, rather than try and sort through and look at all this stuff
Yeah.
today.
And so I'll get you a sheet made up for Friday, you guys can review it
Great.
on your own and then make a decision Monday.
Yep.
Yep. Perfect. All right. I think we're good on action items.
Did you want to go over some of my stuff before correspondence?
The what?
Some of my stuff before correspondence?
Sure. All right, so, all right, list from Kathy. Okay. LRPC is looking for a letter of support
We got that.
for their solid waste proposal.
Oh,
Okay. And I think this is something we've done in the past, is they go for their grant,
right.
and they have a sample in here, and I'm fine with getting that done up in.
Well, there's a section they want you to put in a comment about the waste. Do you want me to play about that? Who is going to do that? Because I don't know your history to do it for you. I can research it with Clay or one of you.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We don't need a volume to go in there, but 2 or 3 sentences would be fine. If you ask them for some input, keep it brief.
I think there's a word missing. There's a section for you to information on the solid
To
waste.
add,
right.
to add.
To add
To
information.
add, okay.
Yeah, right. Okay, and we also have, yeah, this is the
Which one of yous can I refer to once I talk to Clay? Who usually works with that? Clay?
Well, I'll be happy to,
Okay.
yeah, just,
All
you and I
right, I
can,
just wanna, I don't wanna bug all.
you and I can,
There's two things that,
wordsmith it a little bit.
in my speaking with Clay, just as one selectman, I asked him to please generate at least one page on the recycling of paper. That was something we asked him to do a while ago. He's been real busy, with budgets and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is, he's working on, what happens is, you go up there to get rid of a expired or an old fire extinguisher, and they can't take them. They say, go to the fire department. So you now drive to the fire department, they take them and put them on the shelf, and once a month, have a vendor come and pick them up. And Clay has made some inroads there, and I saw the letter that he got, and there was something about it that we questioned, so. No, he wants to do what's right for the town.
Right.
No, it's like taking paint cans, he can't do it. And, he has to go by the letter and the spirit of the rules and regulations. So those are two issues that I asked him to please work on.
All right. So we have an email here from Phil Bennett outlining a couple of small wrinkles with respect to our contracts with him and with our construction manager as it relates to the rural development grant. And Phil is working on that, and I think I'm sure he's sparing no effort at this point. The schedule is getting compressed in terms of being able to get everything done, and it's certainly important that our partners at RDA are engaged and okay with the way we're proceeding. From reading this, I suspect that it's a matter of we may have to reapprove our contract with the
Yeah, I think
with
the
the construction
language that he's concerned about is that we may have to rebid it. It would be a really lengthy process.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that we can work around that, because at this point, that would be,
Are we paying him to do this, or is that coming out of money that he's already under contract for?
Well,
it's
it's
part of
his
this contract.
mistake. I'm sure he's being fair about it, but it's his mistake, it's not our mistake.
Right.
We didn't ask him to do extra work. He just created his own extra work by
Yeah.
making a mistake.
Overlook or something, yeah. All right, police department has 2 officers that are currently unavailable because of COVID exposure, so they're currently in quarantine.
What does the last sentence say, sir?
The exposures are from outside work, so disinfecting the station is not needed.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Speaks volumes.
yeah. So, all right, so we have a question about when we're gonna encumber funds.
Yeah,
Right,
let's-
the reason I'm asking what meeting you're doing it at is because there's other departments that want to request that you encumber the funds, so I should tell
Right.
them when you're going to do that,
So,
so.
and normally we do it at our last
The 12/28.
meeting of the year.
That's the 28th.
And so,
Okay, I'll
yeah,
let them know.
and that's, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
But I appreciate you bringing that up, and if you would let department heads
Department
know.
heads know when, yeah.
So if they have money in their budgets, that they have projects that they want to spend the money on, that has to happen quickly, and anything that hasn't been committed, then we need to be able to encumber funds to cover it.
So, we need to inform department heads and board, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, I haven't been around, so I wasn't sure when you did.
Yep. Okay, schedule for the Tufton Road time for 2021. Says that we're looking for input articles by January 8th for the winter edition.
Who's up?
I'll jump in there.
You want?
Yeah.
That was great.
I'm as unhappy to do that as ever, so that would be fine. All right, and then we have a memo from the code enforcement officer about call I received about trees being cut on Durgan Road. And the fact that we were cut without a public hearing. So whoever did that needs to be put on notice that they're in violation.
Yeah.
And that's not part of code enforcement.
I'm sorry?
They called him even though it has nothing to, it's not part of his, it's more road agent.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I should contact, Jack's been trying to get a hold of Jim, but hasn't heard back from him.
Well, or, we can have town council send the folks a letter. I mean, that's,
I mean, I don't know what you do now that it's done.
I don't have a copy of the ordinance. I don't know whether there's a
yeah,
penalty involved or
yeah,
what the story is.
yeah.
It was voted on at town meeting.
No,
No, yeah, and there's a particular RSA that deals with scenic roads and how that happens, but yeah, I don't know, I'm with you, I don't know what the,
Yeah.
it's an after the fact, but some action has to be taken, at least to acknowledge the violation. I don't know what the remedy is. And again, maybe that's something that town council can
Yeah,
provide us
if
with.
it's statutory, then there's probably some language in there about what the remedy is. So.
Yeah,
Voice.
So do you want me to contact her?
yeah, would you contact Rick and,
Do you know the landowner?
Jack does.
Okay.
all right.
And we might want to talk to Jim. I don't know if Jim's aware.
What's that?
I might want to talk to Jim because I don't know if he's aware of it. Because Jack said that the landowner asked Jim.
Yeah, yeah. All right, I think we got everything off of that. Did I miss anything on your list, Kat?
No, just the snowplow thing.
Yep.
The what?
Snowplow policy that you requested.
Yes.
What I was talking about was not plowing snow out of driveways.
Mm-hmm.
There is a policy of when the road agent puts the plows out on the road and sands and salts.
I looked under ordinances and stuff and I didn't see any.
It's not an ordinance, it's a policy.
Okay.
So what's your suggestion, Lloyd?
There's the bottom line of it that says it needs to be reviewed every fall by the selectmen.
Okay,
It's just a perfunctory
all right.
obligation.
So,
I have no
So-
criticism, so.
so if you can dig it out, we ought to put it on the agenda for next Monday.
Okay,
Thank you for your efforts.
Yeah,
I didn't see one. I mean, I looked under policies too.
Yeah, it's homeowners plowing their snow into the road.
no,
No, I have that.
that's this ordinance that we passed last year.
Yeah, that one I had. I couldn't find the policy.
But there is, and I have never seen it. I remember
Okay.
some of the good old boys that talk about,
Yes.
well, we have a policy and the selectmen are supposed to review it, so
That's where I was
The
coming.
policy for what, though, I'm just
for,
confused.
this is how
Oh,
how the town plows roads. You know, for instance,
Oh,
you know, I don't know, have you ever seen this policy?
Yes.
Okay. Do you
Well,
have a
where is
copy of
it
it?
kept, Lloyd, do you know? Because I looked through policies and I didn't see one, but I will see
So,
what else.
I'll go through my notes.
all right,
yeah, because I remember the conversation, I just don't remember the policy.
well, I remember that it's been alluded to by
Yeah.
some of the old boys, so,
You remember well.
It's a-
Lloyd and I are old timers, we haven't alluded to it.
Yeah.
Maybe Lloyd's alluding. Are you alluding this?
Absolutely.
yeah,
Especially after this week.
yeah. All right. So,
Well, if it's a, so we're not gonna plow the roads until the budget's approved in March.
there you go. Yep, and I was thinking the other day, speaking of plowing roads, that we've been fortunate that I think the first plowable event was Saturday this
Yes.
year,
Yeah.
so.
There was one ice condition. at
Yeah,
the
yeah,
higher
they
elevations.
sanded one morning, I believe, but, yep. So we ought to be, that ought to provide a little bit of relief to the winter maintenance budget
Yeah.
over some of what we've seen in the last several years. All
On
right.
Friday, I got a copy of the current year expenditures for the road agent, and he has $113,000 left in his budget.
Good.
It's gonna be close.
Yeah. Okay, so the number of items in correspondence here. Got, wetlands permit on Governor Wentworth. DES. Dredge and fill. A DES complaint letter. Borough Planning Board notice with respect to acquisition of property across 19 Mile Brook from the RIB site. Certificate of completion for Officer Gillis, patrol skill building course. Carroll County Commissioners proposed 2021 expenditure budget and estimated revenue. And I understand that the budget includes a 14% increase in revenue that they will be billing to the towns over 20,
So 14% increase in taxation.
in taxation, right? So
Well-
they're having a hearing this morning. So,
Elections have consequences.
They do.
And certainly, I hope that the new commissioners are more well-versed in management.
yep. So it's interesting. This budget was prepared by the current commissioners who serve, I think, until the first Monday in January or something like that, right? And it's being presented to the delegation, which has changed since
Right.
last time around. So I suspect there's going to be a lot of redlining going on with respect
Well, I
to
remember,
where they
it's,
go.
it's hard to defend the budget because the budget process goes into March.
Yeah,
It's hard to defend the budget that you didn't create.
yep. All right, a letter from our utility assessor talking about changes in the documents presented by Eversource, and bottom line is that the values submitted in most cases, and this is, I say it's specifically for Tufton Borough, are increases or decreases of less than 1% of the valuation, which has a pretty insignificant impact.
Well, 1% of $14 million is would you like to have that as a weekly salary?
Well,
Annual.
right. All right. So COVID updates, updated emergency order from the governor about wearing masks or cloth face coverings when in public spaces without physical distancing. Primex guidance on employee travel and return to work issues for local government employees. I didn't see anything particularly
I did
concerning.
forward them to the police and fire, because some of them addressed. the-
What's that?
I did forward them to police and fire, because some of
Right.
them addressed them.
Right. News link out of Municipal Association. An update on the school financing. I did see in correspondence that came out this past week, a spreadsheet that shows that under the proposal that's been presented for school funding changes, the amount that would come from Tufton Borough and go and stay with the state rather than going back to local education is like about $1 million. And if I understand that correctly, if that in fact becomes the way things are done, then that will increase taxes by $1 million in the town of Tufton Borough, which is not insignificant.
Correct.
So it's going back to, I mean, it's the same plan that was in effect in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
And when it got reversed, I remember the $1 million stopping
Yeah.
in the local school district. It didn't reduce our taxation. It just changed the formula. But going backwards this way, we will have to make up that $1 million.
Right. So what happens right now is, if you look at your tax bill, there's a local education component and there's a state education component. All of that money stays with our school district. But if they take $1 million out of that and send it someplace else, then, and that's a net $1 million, because they take more and then they send some back, then I think the school district's got to find that $1 million someplace else, but there's not money that's remaining in the local schools. So that the donor towns group is having weekly recurring meetings at 11 a.m. on Monday mornings. They're Zoom meetings, starting today through the middle of January. So
I'm getting a new computer this week, so then maybe I can join up.
there you go. Okay. All right. Executive counselor schedule, another COVID warning, New Hampshire Lakes webinars. Health Trust will continue to remote operate through the pandemic. Excuse me, I think that's all we have in regular correspondence. So let's go to Selectmen's updates. Lloyd, do you have anything?
Yes, First thing is, today is the anniversary of Pearl Harbor. On behalf of the Selectmen, we want to say thank you to all our current veterans and all our past veterans. So, number 2 is perambulation. We're looking for some paperwork.
With the file.
Okay. Any luck? Evidently, someone has looked at it and didn't get back in the proper place, so.
Yeah.
But it has historical,
Right.
please feel free
Search
to
continues.
Yep.
put on APB. In my role as chairman of the board, I got a phone call from our police chief and asked him to submit it in writing, and he did. He has, his staff is limited, 3 people are out of work. And, you know, he was straightforward.
Is it 3 or 2?
2,
3,
3?
yes.
I can't count that.
The second person I got a call from is the fire chief, and he's working on it right now. There was a structure fire in Country Village with a person injured in the fire. The person is out, fire was put out, but pursuant to our policy, he said, you know, he wanted to make sure that he notified someone, and, you know, like, it was a busy weekend for them, with an untimely death, a mutual aid call, fire in Wolfboro, and then late last night, a car into a tree on Lime Pond with some unique issues there. So, you know, his department has been pushed to the limits, but he was very professional when he woke me up. The other thing is, when the large fireboat, boat 1, was taken out, the first freezing weather a couple days ago, the fire department told me that the cement ramp is going to need attention.
Docks and bridges.
At 19 Mile Bay. I went down to take a look at it, but I also asked, you know, the people. There were 2 things that went on this year. First of all, the water was 18 inches lower than normal. So the use, there's only 3 of them on this side of the lake that there's public access to. The other thing is, I live and go by that intersection twice a day at least. And this year, it was stunning, the trucks and the large vehicles and the large boats that are being pushed in there. I'd like permission to have the selectmen notify Tyler Phillips Jr. Maybe we want to bundle the repair to that, or the needed repair, to have him take a look at it. And is it something we need to do independently of the wharf, or do we bundle when we do Union Wharf?
All right, well, I'm going to be...
What are your thoughts?
I'm going to be talking to him. I'll let him
Yeah,
decide.
mention to them, it may be that we need to do something similar to what we did at Lake Road.
Yes, and we did it Narrow Lake, and both of those projects we put out to bid, and local contractors stepped up to the plate, saved us money.
Yeah.
So, but, you know, now with the store open and whatnot, you know, there's more activity there, as we're all aware of, so.
Yeah. And I know that at Lake Road, and I think the low water contributed to it, but there must have been a heck of a lot of power loading going on, because the area beyond the new ramp has been scoured out pretty badly.
Yes.
So you can't get your trailer in as far as you want. You just, you know,
Shove
just
it
power up to shove it up on the bunks and just wash all the bottom away from behind the ramp and make it worse for the next guy.
Yes.
I think the lake level's back up though, isn't it? I know my
It's-
ponds are.
You know, and I think the lake level is, last time I looked, it was, the gap between where it normally is and where it is was closing, yep.
Thank
Anything
you.
else?
Thank you.
Chip?
Well, I had another budget meeting on Tuesday that went pretty well. Got some budgets approved. Still have a vocal minority who are looking for the employees to pay in some contribution. The increase of deductibles or any other machination isn't good enough, so it's an ongoing conversation. The thing I stressed to them, and that's one of the reasons why I really didn't want to revisit that budget, is that that line item this year went down, last year went down, I think the year before it went up a little bit. But historically, there hasn't been a calamitous rise in healthcare costs. And if you look back 10 years on our tax rate, it's been a pretty consistent 2 to 2.5% increase in taxes, which is pretty much the rate of inflation. So I think we've done a good job. I tried to stress to them that we need to look at the big picture. We want to start looking at line items as driving the budget. I think we're going to spend an awful lot more time with budget hearings, budget meetings. And I think overall, I mean, it was spirited, but at the end of the day, I think we all sort of shook hands and got over it.
Sometimes you have to agree to disagree about some stuff and move on.
Fourth time doing it this round. And I think maybe we're starting to get the idea that I'm an immovable object in spite of their considerable force. But I think unless I can foresee, or if we can foresee some dramatic change in that formulation, that I don't think we're really in a position of having to change it. But the other point I made was, even if we were to charge our employees 10%, let's say, it wouldn't have changed that particular budget by a nickel, because that 10% would come in as well as the revenue and things, or a change on the payroll scheme.
Mhm.
At one point, there was talk about collective bargaining.
On that note there, Chip, I agree with you 100%. Your figures are right on. In the last three years, our COLA has been 1.3, 1.6, and 2.8. In other words, the cost of living has gone up 5.7%. On your watch, it's been masterful.
And you got to throw in the fact that we did a library, we've done all of our capital projects as we gone along, and still had a pretty consistent, reasonable increase in taxes over time. And actually, they went down this year, but I drive some numbers a bit. There was one other thing when you were reading the correspondence, but yeah, let me just take a look.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I missed it. I'm sorry.
Oh, all right.
That's what happens when you go.
Yep, we get it. So the only thing that I have to report on is planning board meeting last Thursday. The Wolfboro RAB hearing continued. At the previous meeting, the board had asked some specific questions that needed answers. We received those answers from the town of Wolfboro. All of this was reviewed by planning board council. The hearing closed. We accepted the plan. We don't have approval authority over it. We made a specific series of recommendations, some of which they've already said that they will do, some of which they're pushing back against because they're permit issues in terms of pollutant levels. The DES specifies that, and it's like, well, if we say we're going to give you something lower than that, then at any rate, we're on the record with that moving forward. I may have shared with the board before that the planning board is engaging with a different consultant to do the master plan update. We should have a cost on that at our next meeting. I suspect it will be in the $8,000 to $10,000 range. I anticipate that we'll be doing a new survey. It's been like 5 years since the last one was done. As we do the rewrite, one of the things that we want to do is incorporate the 2020 decennial federal census data as it becomes available so that we're up to date. We do have some money that had been encumbered previously on the master plan update. Depending upon where this comes in, we'll see, but I'm going to recommend that we, if we have room, that we encumber funds against this contract this year and just
Yeah.
get her done, and put to bed in 2021.
So is there any discussion about taxation? What are we doing there? Or is that something we have to do?
You're talking about there was on the parcel?
On the Wolfboro piece?
No,
Okay.
no, I don't think
So
that's a
something we have to do?
planning board thing. I think that's us thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
I know
planning board, the thing about paving driveways, I know I asked you about it.
Thank you for the reminder. So we have 2 ordinance changes that will be, that have come forward for town election this year. The hearing will be on January 7th at the planning board meeting. The one that we submitted on driveways, and the other one has to do with storage buildings, specifically addressing in our zoning regulations storage. CIP reported out to budget committee. I was out of town, so how'd that go?
That went great. It's always a forecast that they have absolutely no control over, but it seemed fine. We did have a discussion about the police cruiser again. Premised on the idea that if you get approved in March, which don't put the cruiser into service until December, that it's actually a 7-year turnaround, not an 8-year turnaround. So what are we doing? I mean, he wants another cruiser in 2021, and he's talking about rust repairs. It's kind of a movable feast at the police department as far as their cruisers are concerned. The other issue that came up was capital reserve for the police station. And given that conversation and our, I'll finish up with what I remember I was going to tell you about. Our thought about having a warrant article and then taking some money out of undesignated funds is I'm wondering whether or not, and I would ask to have Kathy to ask DRA if we can make 2 warrant articles. One which would be a capital reserve warrant article, and the other which would be a taking money out undesignated funds warrant article. The reason I say that is because I think if we package it all together and push forward and get 50 people at town meeting, I think we're gonna have a problem getting public buy-in on buying a police station with 45 people voting. But I think we still need to have a continuation of the capital reserve if that would happen.
Right.
So just thinking along those lines, Gordon, as chairman of the budget committee, was pressing pretty hard for, current cost of money being 1.5%, 2% while we borrow for 5 years. So I guess we have to get Jack, once we get our figures, we'll get Jack Widmer involved and get a loan figure.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because when they were doing the fire station for $2 million, they went to a bank and got 2.49% from Northright. And over the course of the loan, no prepayment penalty, that will save the taxpayers $500,000 in interest. Now, they're still coming up with the money, so, but, I understand where the chairman, what he's saying, so.
Yeah. I mean, an equal argument could be made to
You,
bond
yes,
the whole
you are
project, so
correct.
people like me can buy municipal bonds and actually make a living.
But the building that he was chairman of didn't go that route, did he?
Right.
Mhm.
At any rate, so that discussion started to heat up a little bit, which is good. I think in January, when we actually sit down and talk about it, warrant articles, it'll get more fleshed out.
Yep.
Plus, hopefully, we'll have a number on it. The one thing I did forget was, given Lloyd's driving habits over the last week, and your travel habits over the last week or so, I did ask Kathy to check with the state to see what would happen if I were down to me,
Yeah.
nobody else, for whatever reason, whether it's quarantining or hospitalization or whatever. So the system doesn't just collapse.
Right.
It takes more than just one signature on checks. And we still need to get the budget done, which takes at least 2 of us to vote, which I think we could do electronically without any problem. But I did ask her to put something together. I think it's good to have a plan, even if nothing happens.
Absolutely.
At least Lauren will be able to sleep. We're trying to keep them stress-free, so.
Good.
Yeah, I thought the CIP was fine. They are a lot more conservative. And yet, I look at our track record over the last 4 years, or 3.5 years, and one would think by listening to our CIP committee that the tax rate and everything else has got these big spikes. But if you look at the graph, there's no enormous spikes.
Right.
We always eliminate something if we know we're gonna have to buy something else, and the department heads report to her and the committee and give them their wish list, but that's not always how it plays out.
One of the remarkable pages is the last one that breaks down the school, the county, and the town, and that speaks volumes of just how judicious everyone's been.
Yeah, I mean,
To pat people on the back.
I've been dying to become a tax inspector, but I just can't bring it out. So,
All right. Do we have any other business? We will need a non-public session, by the way.
okay.
Any other public business?
I have none.
Any public input?
I have none. If Chip happens to be down 2 people, I'll gladly give him my opinion, not a problem.
Opinions aren't what I'm looking for.
And you do know that on signing checks, if you only have one selectman, you only need the treasurer. It only has to be one selectman and a treasurer.
Yeah, okay. No, that's good. All right, so we need to go into non-public for a personnel issue.
Okay.
Yep. So 91A3, 91A:3, Karen, I don't know what it is.
I'll second.
Wood, yes.
Marcus, and yes.
All the yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.